The golden October sun was setting over Pine Grove, California when Sofia Mendez disappeared into the night. Population 5,200. As dusk fell, the town's iconic vineyards cast long shadows across County Road 16, their autumn colors fading to silhouettes against the dimming sky. At 10:17 p.m., according to surveillance footage, Sofia's blue Honda Civic passed the Lakeside Winery entrance. The 25-year-old marine biologist, just promoted at the Monterey Bay Research Center, was heading home after celebrating with colleagues. The camera captured her familiar car moving slowly under a canopy of old oak trees, headlights cutting through the thickening fog, before vanishing around the bend near Crescent Lake. From that moment, Pine Grove would never be the same. For Sofia left, and never returned. What happened in the next 45 minutes would haunt this small Northern California town for 17 long years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. In the autumn of 2007, Pine Grove was experiencing a record grape harvest, the local economy thriving as wineries prepared for their busiest season. Against this backdrop of prosperity and celebration, Sofia Mendez represented the town's brightest promise. With her infectious laugh, brilliant mind, and determination to protect the region's fragile coastal ecosystems, she embodied everything the community valued. The eldest daughter of Mexican immigrants who had established one of the town's most respected small wineries, Sofia had balanced her promising scientific career with deep community ties. On October 15, Sofia attended a small celebration at the Lighthouse, a popular gastropub overlooking Crescent Lake. Her promotion to lead researcher on a critical ocean acidification project was cause for celebration among her tight-knit group of colleagues. Security cameras showed her laughing, raising a glass of local Pinot Noir, occasionally checking her phone as the evening progressed. Friends later recalled she seemed excited but distracted, mentioning she needed to get home to finish preparations for an early morning research trip. She was on top of the world that night, remembered Danielle Cooper, a fellow researcher. She'd just secured additional funding for our project. We all toasted to her success. She didn't drink much, maybe one glass. She was driving, after all, and Sofia was always responsible. The night air had grown chilly when Sofia hugged her friends goodbye around 10 p.m. Security footage captured her walking to her blue Honda Civic, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing her favorite olive green jacket with the Marine Institute's logo embroidered on the breast pocket. The car's engine turned over smoothly, headlights illuminating a thin mist beginning to form over the parking lot. She rolled past the lighthouse, waving once to the security guard who knew her well. "Drive safe, Sofia. That fog's coming in thick," he called. She smiled, nodded, and pulled onto County Road 16, a winding two-lane road that snaked between vineyards and redwood groves before passing Crescent Lake on its way to her small cottage on the outskirts of town. The surveillance camera at Lakeside Winery captured her passing at 10:17 p.m. A quick text to her mother, Carmen, showed she was on her way. "Be home soon. Don't wait up. Big day tomorrow." It would be the last digital footprint Sofia Mendez would ever leave. Around 10:30 p.m., two fishermen setting up for night fishing on Crescent Lake reported seeing headlights through the thickening fog near the bridge that arched over the narrowest part of the water. The lights seemed to slow, then disappeared suddenly. One fisherman thought he heard a splash but dismissed it as a jumping fish or waterfowl. The fog swallowed all sound in sight that night, creating a ghostly blanket over the lake's dark surface. By morning, Carmen Mendez knew something was terribly wrong. Sofia's bed remained untouched, her research equipment still packed by the door for her morning expedition. 5 missed calls to Sofia's cell phone went straight to voicemail, each one increasing Carmen's fear. By 6:45 a.m., she called her son Miguel, who lived in town. "Your sister never came home," she said, her voice catching. "This isn't like her. Something's happened." Miguel arrived within minutes, his wife Maria following in their car. Together, they drove the route Sofia would have taken, searching for any sign of her blue Honda Civic along the fog-shrouded County Road 16. Seeing nothing, they proceeded directly to the Pine Grove Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Thomas Reeves was on duty that morning, a 30-year veteran of law enforcement in the county. At first, he was measured in his response, taking notes while explaining that adults sometimes change plans without notice. "Ms. Mendez is what, 25 years old?" he asked, reviewing the information. She could have stayed with a friend, decided to drive to the coast for her research. There are many explanations. But Carmen was insistent. "Sheriff, my daughter had equipment worth thousands of dollars packed for today's research. Her passport and laptop are still at home. She texted me she was coming home. Sofia would never just disappear." Miguel added firmly, "She has perfect attendance at the research center. She's supposed to lead a team today. She wouldn't miss it for anything." Sheriff Reeves nodded slowly, finally recognizing the legitimate concern. He began making calls, first to Sofia's colleagues at the lighthouse, confirming she'd left around 10 p.m., seemingly heading home. All reported she was sober, professional, and excited about her research trip the following day. By noon, concern had evolved into a full search operation. Deputies began canvassing County Road 16, checking ditches and turnouts for any sign of the blue Honda. The Marine Research Center sent staff to help, many canceling their own projects to search for their missing colleague. Volunteers from town joined, some on ATVs, others on foot, combing through the dense wooded areas alongside the road. Sheriff Reeves ordered helicopter support from the county, and by mid-afternoon, the distinctive thump of rotor blades echoed over Pine Grove as aircraft swept low over vineyards, forests, and the glittering surface of Crescent Lake. Search and rescue dogs sniffed through underbrush while their handlers called Sofia's name, voices swallowed by the vastness of the Northern California landscape. Miguel joined the ground search, his eyes red-rimmed from strain and worry, scanning every shadow and hollow as if his sister might suddenly appear. "Sofia," he called repeatedly, his voice growing hoarse. "Sofia, where are you?" Carmen remained at home, surrounded by friends from the local Mexican-American community, preparing food nobody would eat, answering the same questions repeatedly as neighbors and acquaintances arrived with concern etched on their faces. The first potential lead came when deputies found faint tire marks veering slightly off County Road 16 near the Crescent Lake Bridge, the same location where fishermen had reported seeing headlights the night before. The marks were inconclusive, partially erased by morning dew and fog, but they raised alarms. Divers were called in to examine the lake, though the water was deep and visibility poor. By nightfall of that first day, the search had yielded nothing conclusive: no car, no Sofia, no certain evidence of what might have happened. Local news stations arrived, setting up cameras near the sheriff's department, broadcasting Sofia's image across Northern California. Her smile, captured mid-laugh in a photo taken at her graduation, became the face of a mystery that would soon grip the entire region. 25-year-old marine biologist missing, read the caption beneath her image. Anyone with information, please contact the Pine Grove Sheriff's Department. As days passed without answers, speculation began to fill the vacuum. Some suggested Sofia had become disoriented in the fog and driven off the road at some unsearched location. Others whispered about possible foul play, pointing to the isolated stretch of County Road 16 as a potential danger zone. The most persistent theory centered on Crescent Lake Bridge, where the tire marks and fisherman's account converged into a troubling possibility that Sofia's car had somehow gone into the water. Sheriff Reeves requested additional diving resources, but the lake was vast and deep, with underwater caves and thick silt that made exploration treacherous. County resources were limited, and without concrete evidence that the car was in the lake, comprehensive searching proved difficult. As the search entered its second week, media attention intensified. Regional papers ran front-page stories about Sofia, highlighting her academic achievements, her community work, and her family's anguish. Television crews interviewed her colleagues, who spoke tearfully about her passion for marine conservation and her meticulous research methods. She was going to change the world, Danielle Cooper told reporters, wiping away tears. She already was changing it, one research project at a time. The sudden attention brought both help and hindrance. Volunteers poured in from neighboring communities, some with search and rescue experience, others simply wanting to help. But with them came amateur sleuths, conspiracy theorists, and those seeking their moment in the spotlight. Sheriff Reeves found himself managing not just a missing person case, but also the circus that formed around it. Meanwhile, in the Mendez household, grief and uncertainty took root. Carmen maintained a shrine-like corner in the living room with Sofia's photographs, academic awards, and a perpetually lit candle. She attended Mass daily, praying for her daughter's return, refusing to accept the increasingly probable worst outcome. Miguel took leave from his job at the bank to support the search efforts and care for his mother. His wife Maria managed the family winery operations, keeping their business afloat while the family focused on finding Sofia. "We won't give up," Miguel told reporters firmly, though the strain showed in the new lines etched around his eyes. "My sister is out there somewhere." As weeks turned to months with no breakthroughs, official search efforts necessarily scaled back. The case remained open, but deputies returned to their regular duties. Volunteers dwindled to a core group, mostly family friends and Sofia's colleagues who refused to abandon hope. The mystery of Sofia Mendez became part of Pine Grove's identity. In the local school, her disappearance became a cautionary tale about driving in fog or traveling alone at night. At community events, a moment of silence was often observed for "our missing daughter." Her face on missing person posters, though increasingly weathered, remained a constant presence on bulletin boards and shop windows throughout town. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 1 year after her disappearance, Pine Grove held a candlelight vigil at Crescent Lake. Hundreds attended, forming a glowing circle around the water where many believed Sofia's car had vanished. The Mendez family stood together, Carmen clutching her rosary, Miguel with his arm protectively around his mother's shoulders. Sheriff Reeves attended as well, standing slightly apart, his face grave as he watched the community unite in remembrance and hope. "Sofia Mendez represents the best of Pine Grove," Mayor Eleanor Walsh said, addressing the crowd. "Brilliant, kind, dedicated to our community and our environment. We will not forget her. We will not stop looking." But as years passed, active searching inevitably waned. The sheriff's department followed occasional tips, reported sightings, confused memories, theories from armchair detectives, but none led to Sofia or her blue Honda Civic. The case grew cold, filed away with other unsolved mysteries that haunt small towns across America. Carmen and Miguel never stopped their personal search. Each month, Miguel would put up fresh missing person posters, replacing those faded by sun and rain. Carmen wrote letters to newspapers, police departments, and eventually to true crime podcasts and television shows, begging for attention to her daughter's case. "Sofia deserves to be found," each letter began. "She deserves justice and her family deserves answers." 5 years passed. 10. The community's acute grief mellowed into a dull, persistent ache. New residents moved to Pine Grove, learning about the Mendez girl as part of local lore rather than a fresh wound. Sheriff Reeves retired, replaced by younger officers who knew Sofia's case only from files and occasional conversations with the family. Carmen's hair turned completely gray, her once straight posture curved under the weight of uncertain grief. Miguel, now running the family winery, had children of his own who knew their Aunt Sofia only through photographs and stories. The family preserved her room exactly as she'd left it, research papers neatly stacked, marine biology textbooks lining the shelves, a half-written journal entry still open on her desk from the day she disappeared. By 2024, 17 years after Sofia vanished, Pine Grove had changed considerably. The once small town had grown into a popular wine country destination. New housing developments sprawled where vineyards once dominated, and Crescent Lake had become a recreational hotspot, with paddleboarders and kayakers replacing the solitary fishermen of years past. But beneath the surface of progress and prosperity, the mystery of Sofia Mendez remained an unhealed wound, a reminder that even in the safest communities, darkness can descend without warning, swallowing the brightest lights without explanation. And then, on a crisp March morning in 2024, everything changed. At Pine Grove's newly built marina on Crescent Lake, a group of environmental science students from UC Davis arrived with state-of-the-art equipment and a mission unrelated to Sofia Mendez. Led by Professor Jackson Chen, they had come to conduct the first comprehensive mapping of Crescent Lake's underwater topography as part of a climate change study examining the effects of California's recent drought cycles on inland water systems. Today we'll be using side-scanning sonar to create a complete map of the lake bed, Professor Chen explained to his eager students as they unloaded equipment from university vans. This technology allows us to see through silt and sediment to identify underwater features with remarkable clarity. The students deployed 2 small research boats equipped with sonar devices that sent high-frequency sound waves through the water. These waves bounced off objects on the lake bed, returning to create detailed images of what lay beneath the surface. As morning progressed into afternoon, the team methodically covered the lake in a grid pattern, their equipment humming softly as it gathered data. Near the deepest part of the lake, approximately 30 yards from the bridge where those fishermen had reported seeing headlights 17 years earlier, graduate student Layla Washington noticed something unusual on her monitor. The sonar had detected a large, distinctly man-made object partially buried in the silt. "Professor Chen," she called, pointing to the screen. "I'm getting a strong return here. The dimensions and shape. I think it's a vehicle." Chen studied the image, his expression growing serious. "You're right, Layla. That's definitely a car." He adjusted the settings, enhancing the image. "And judging by the size and shape, it's been there a while." Within an hour, the team had contacted the Pine Grove Sheriff's Department. By late afternoon, current Sheriff Alicia Dominguez stood on the shore, speaking with Professor Chen while watching his team mark the location with buoys. "We've found similar situations in other bodies of water," Chen explained. "Sometimes people dispose of stolen vehicles in lakes. Sometimes it's insurance fraud. And sometimes..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Sheriff Dominguez, though relatively new to Pine Grove, knew immediately what this could mean. "I need to make some calls," she said, pulling out her phone. "Please don't share this information with anyone just yet." News travels fast in small towns, however. By evening, whispers about a submerged car in Crescent Lake had reached Miguel Mendez. He drove to the lake immediately, arriving as the research team was packing up their equipment. Sheriff Dominguez intercepted him at the shore. "Miguel, we don't know anything definitive yet," she said gently. "We've contacted a specialized recovery team from Sacramento. They'll be here tomorrow to investigate properly." Miguel stared out at the lake, its surface now rippling with the evening breeze, the setting sun casting an orange glow across the water. "It's her, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "After all this time, it's Sofia." Sheriff Dominguez placed a hand on his shoulder. "We don't know that yet. But I promise you'll be the first to know when we have answers." That night, Pine Grove buzzed with speculation. Residents who had lived through Sofia's disappearance felt old wounds reopening. Newer residents learned the details of the case for the first time, the story passing from person to person in hushed tones. At the Mendez home, Carmen lit extra candles around Sofia's photograph, her weathered hands trembling as she prayed for resolution, whatever form it might take. The morning dawned clear and cold over Crescent Lake as the specialized recovery team from Sacramento arrived. Their convoy of trucks and equipment drew curious onlookers who gathered at the cordoned-off marina, whispering among themselves. The recovery team, led by veteran diver Marcus Reynolds, moved with practiced efficiency, unloading gear that glinted in the early sunlight. Their diving suits, oxygen tanks, and specialized lift bags created an island of urgent activity against the serene backdrop of the lake. Sheriff Dominguez established a wide perimeter, keeping the growing crowd at a respectful distance. News vans from Sacramento and San Francisco had already arrived, their satellite dishes reaching skyward, reporters speaking in hushed tones to cameras with the lake as their backdrop. The story had spread overnight: a car found in Crescent Lake, potentially connected to the 17-year-old disappearance of Sofia Mendez. Miguel Mendez arrived early, Carmen insisting on coming with him despite her age and fragility. They sat in Miguel's truck at the edge of the perimeter, watching silently as the recovery team prepared their equipment. Sheriff Dominguez approached their vehicle, her expression compassionate but professional. "The divers will be going down within the hour," she explained, resting a hand on the truck's door. "I want you to understand this is going to be a slow process. Safety comes first, both for the team and for preserving whatever they might find." Carmen nodded, clutching her rosary. "We've waited 17 years, Sheriff. A few more hours won't break us." Miguel simply stared at the lake, the muscles in his jaw working silently. Marcus Reynolds conducted a final briefing with his team near the water's edge. The sonar imaging shows a sedan-type vehicle, approximately 30 yards from the north side of the bridge, at a depth of 68 feet. The car appears to be upside down, partially buried in silt. Visibility will be poor, maybe 3 to 5 feet at best. His team nodded, familiar with the challenges of vehicle recovery from deep, murky waters. 2 divers would go down first to assess the situation and attach lift bags, specialized inflatable devices that would help raise the vehicle to the surface. A support boat would maintain communication and monitor oxygen levels. "Remember," Reynolds added, his voice dropping slightly, "this is potentially a recovery of human remains. We treat this site with absolute respect and dignity." By mid-morning, the first divers entered the water. The crowd watched in tense silence as bubbles broke the surface, marking the divers' descent into the murky depths. Professor Chen and his students remained on site, their research equipment now repurposed to help monitor the recovery operation. Layla Washington stood near her professor, her discovery from the previous day now the center of a potential breakthrough in a long cold case. "I keep thinking about the family," she whispered to Chen. 17 years of not knowing. Chen nodded gravely. "Sometimes science brings answers people have been seeking for a very long time. Not always happy answers, but truth has its own value." Beneath the surface, the divers moved carefully through the dark water, powerful lights cutting through the gloom. At 60 feet, visibility diminished dramatically, fine silt swirling around their lights like underwater snow. Their communication was limited to radio transmissions that crackled through the murk. Approaching target area, came the first diver's voice through the surface team's speakers. "Visibility very poor. Following the sonar guidance." Minutes later, a second transmission broke through. "We have visual on the vehicle. Confirmed sedan, blue color visible in patches. Vehicle is inverted, front end partially buried in silt." On shore, Miguel gripped his mother's hand tightly. The color confirmation blue matched Sofia's Honda Civic. The underwater team worked methodically, clearing silt from around the vehicle to attach the bright orange lift bags to the chassis. Their movements were deliberate, each action calculated to disturb the scene as little as possible. When one diver's light passed across the rear of the vehicle, he paused. "Surface team, we have partial plate visibility. I can make out California plate, last digits appear to be 473. Sheriff Dominguez immediately radioed back, confirmed that matches the Mendez vehicle. The tension on shore was palpable as the divers continued their work, attaching the lift bags and securing lines to the car's frame. Nearly 2 hours after they had first descended, the team leader radioed, "Lift bags secured. Beginning inflation process. Stand by for vehicle ascent." On the lake surface, bubbles began to appear more rapidly as air filled the lift bags beneath. The recovery team on boats positioned themselves, ready to guide the vehicle to shallower water once it rose. The crowd on shore had grown substantially, word spreading throughout Pine Grove that Sofia Mendez's car was being recovered after 17 years. Carmen began to pray audibly, her Spanish words flowing in a rhythmic murmur as Miguel stood beside her, one arm around her shoulders. Former Sheriff Thomas Reeves had arrived as well, now in his 70s but standing straight, his weathered face solemn as he watched the operation he had once initiated, but could never complete. "We have movement," came the radio transmission. "Vehicle is breaking free from the silt." A collective breath seemed to be held by everyone present. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited, eyes fixed on the dark water. Then, nearly 30 feet from shore, the water began to churn. Bubbles erupted in a widening circle, followed by the murky outline of something large breaking the surface. First came the lift bags, bright orange against the blue-gray water. Then, slowly, the undercarriage of a car emerged, dripping with lake water and draped with weeds. The once blue paint was now a mottled patchwork of algae and rust, but it was unmistakably a Honda Civic, its wheels pointing skyward like a creature frozen in its death throes. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Carmen began to sob, her prayers giving way to grief long suppressed but never truly absent. Miguel stood rigid, his face a mask of pain as he finally saw the physical evidence of what they had feared for 17 years. As the recovery team secured the vehicle with additional lines and began towing it toward shore, something unexpected floated to the surface near the boat, a white shoe, weathered by years underwater but recognizable as a woman's sneaker. A member of the recovery team quickly retrieved it, placing it in an evidence bag without comment, but everyone saw. It was the kind of practical athletic shoe a marine biologist might wear for fieldwork. "Oh God, her shoe," Carmen whispered, the simple object breaking through her composure. She wore those every day for work. Sheriff Dominguez approached them again. "We're moving the vehicle to the boat ramp where we can secure it properly. I need to ask you both to remain here for now. Once we've stabilized the scene, you can come closer." Miguel nodded mechanically, but his eyes never left the slowly moving car as it was guided toward shore, water streaming from its undercarriage. The news cameras captured every moment, their lenses zooming in on the vehicle that had become a somber time capsule of Pine Grove's most enduring mystery. The recovery team worked with grim efficiency as the car reached the concrete boat ramp. Tarps were quickly erected around the vehicle, shielding it from cameras and onlookers. Forensic technicians in white protective suits approached, documenting every detail before anyone would be allowed to open the doors. Sheriff Dominguez returned to the Mendez family after speaking with the forensics team. Her expression was grave but compassionate. "Miguel, Carmen. I need to prepare you. The technicians can see through the windows. There appears to be human remains inside the vehicle." Carmen crossed herself, tears flowing freely. Miguel closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing a physical blow. When he opened them again, his voice was steady despite its roughness. "We need to see. We've waited 17 years to find her. We need to see." "I understand," the sheriff replied gently. "Once the forensic team has documented everything and it's safe to approach, I'll bring you over. But I want you to be prepared for how different things will be after all this time underwater." The crowd had grown silent, many now sitting on the grass or leaning against vehicles, watching the screened-off area where the Civic rested, water still dripping from its frame. The story was spreading rapidly beyond Pine Grove. News helicopters circled overhead, and social media was already lighting up with the breaking news. "Breaking, car of missing marine biologist Sofia Mendez found in Crescent Lake after 17 years. Professor Chen and his students remained as well, their research project now part of something far larger than they had anticipated." "I'm glad we found her," Layla told her professor quietly. "Even if it's not the outcome everyone hoped for, at least the family can have answers now." Chen nodded solemnly. "Science serves many purposes. Today it's serving justice and closure." Behind the screens, forensic technicians worked methodically, photographing and documenting every aspect of the vehicle before attempting to open it. After nearly an hour, Sheriff Dominguez received word that they were ready to examine the interior. She returned to Miguel and Carmen. "They're going to open the car now," she explained gently. "I can bring you closer, but I want you to stay with me. This will be difficult." Together, they walked toward the screened area, passing through a gap in the tarps that shielded the scene from public view. Inside, the Civic rested on the concrete ramp, water still occasionally dripping from its frame. The once vibrant blue paint was now a patchwork of decay and discoloration. Despite 17 years underwater, it was unmistakably Sofia's car, the Marine Research Center parking permit still visible on the faded bumper, a small charm hanging from the rearview mirror that Carmen had given her daughter for protection. The forensic team leader approached, his expression somber behind his protective mask. "We're ready to open the driver's side door." The pressure equalization when we bring it up means it should open without too much difficulty. Sheriff Dominguez nodded, keeping one hand lightly on Carmen's arm for support. Miguel stood tall, his jaw clenched as he prepared himself for what they might see. The technician carefully approached the driver's door, testing it gently before applying more pressure. With a groaning creak of metal that had been submerged for nearly 2 decades, the door swung open. Lake water spilled out, along with the unmistakable evidence that someone had indeed been inside. In the driver's seat were the skeletal remains of a person still secured by a seatbelt, remnants of clothing clinging to the bones. Carmen let out a soft cry, her knees buckling slightly before Miguel caught her. "Sofia," she whispered. "Mi hija." The forensic team worked respectfully but efficiently, documenting the position of the remains and the condition of the vehicle's interior. One technician carefully retrieved a waterlogged leather wallet from what remained of a jacket pocket. Opening it cautiously, he revealed a partially preserved identification card. Though damaged by years underwater, the photograph and name were still visible: Sofia Mendez, Marine Research Center. "We'll need to conduct DNA testing for absolute confirmation," the technician explained gently, "but given the vehicle registration, location, and ID, we can say with reasonable certainty that these are the remains of Sofia Mendez." Miguel nodded, his arms still around his mother. "What happens now?" "We'll complete documentation here, then transfer the remains to the county medical examiner," Sheriff Dominguez explained. "They'll work to determine cause of death if possible, though after this much time, it may be difficult." As they spoke, one of the forensic team members examining the exterior of the vehicle called out, "Sheriff, you should see this." Dominguez approached, followed by Miguel, who insisted on seeing everything related to his sister's case. The technician was pointing to the rear bumper of the Civic, where the paint was scraped away in a distinctive pattern. "These aren't consistent with hitting rocks or the bridge," the technician explained. "This looks like impact damage from another vehicle relatively high off the ground, like from a truck or SUV bumper." Miguel's expression darkened. "Are you saying someone hit her car? That this wasn't an accident?" The technician glanced at Sheriff Dominguez, who nodded for him to continue. "It's too early to make definitive statements, but yes, these marks are consistent with a rear-end collision, potentially at significant speed. The angle suggests it could have pushed the car sideways." Carmen, who had joined them, gasped. "Someone did this to her? All these years, we thought it was the fog, the bridge, an accident." Sheriff Dominguez placed a hand on Carmen's shoulder. "We don't know anything for certain yet. Please, let's not jump to conclusions until we have more evidence." But the damage pattern had changed the atmosphere around the recovery. What had begun as the sad resolution of a tragic accident was now taking on a more sinister dimension. Forensic technicians began examining the car with renewed intensity, searching for any evidence that might have survived years underwater. As the examination continued, another discovery deepened the mystery. The technician examining the trunk area called Sheriff Dominguez over. "There's something you should see, Sheriff." When the trunk was carefully opened, they found Sofia's research equipment still packed neatly inside waterproof cases containing sampling gear, a camera and a protective housing, notebooks and Ziploc bags. But alongside them was something unexpected: a metal box, the kind used for secure document storage, with a small lock. "This doesn't match the other research equipment," the technician noted. "And it's been secured deliberately." Sheriff Dominguez instructed the team to document it thoroughly before attempting to open it. When they finally did, using specialized tools to avoid damaging the contents, they found a collection of papers, water-damaged but partially preserved thanks to the sealed metal container. Miguel leaned forward, trying to make out what they contained. "These look like charts, data tables," he said, squinting at the faded pages. "And these are photographs." The images, though blurred and discolored from partial water exposure, showed what appeared to be industrial equipment near a waterway. Other pages contained what looked like chemical analysis results and handwritten notes. Professor Chen, who had been granted access to the scene due to his team's role in the discovery, examined the documents with growing concern. "These appear to be evidence of toxic chemical dumping," he said quietly. "Based on the notations I can make out, someone was documenting illegal waste disposal in a watershed area." Sheriff Dominguez looked up sharply. "Are you saying Sofia was investigating environmental crimes?" "It would align with her work," Chen confirmed. "As a marine biologist studying coastal ecosystems, she would have been particularly concerned about pollutants entering waterways." Miguel's expression transformed as realization dawned. So someone might have wanted to stop her investigation. To silence her. The discovery of the metal box changed everything. What had begun as the recovery of a long-missing person, presumed to be the victim of a tragic accident, now appeared to be something far more deliberate and criminal. Sheriff Dominguez immediately contacted the district attorney's office, requesting additional resources for what was now potentially a homicide investigation. As the day wore on, the car was carefully loaded onto a transport vehicle, covered completely to preserve any remaining evidence. Sofia's remains were respectfully transferred to the medical examiner's office, accompanied by a deputy who would maintain chain of custody. The metal box and its contents were taken directly to a specialized forensic laboratory where experts in document recovery would work to extract as much information as possible from the water-damaged papers. The media presence had grown substantially, with national outlets now joining local stations. Sheriff Dominguez gave a brief statement, confirming only that Sofia Mendez's vehicle had been recovered and that an investigation was ongoing. She declined to share details about the potential evidence found, citing the integrity of the investigation. Professor Chen and his students packed up their equipment as the sun began to set over Crescent Lake. Before leaving, Chen approached the Mendez family. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said softly. "But I want you to know, your daughter's work was important. If what we found in that box is what I think it is, she was trying to protect this community and its natural resources. She was very brave." Carmen took his hand, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you for finding her. All these years, not knowing, at least now we can bring her home." As night fell over Pine Grove, the news spread rapidly through the community and beyond. The discovery that had begun as the sad resolution of a cold case was evolving into something more complex and troubling. Sofia Mendez, it seemed, hadn't simply driven off the road in heavy fog. The evidence suggested she may have been deliberately forced off Crescent Lake Bridge and potentially because of what she knew. In the days following the recovery of Sofia's car, Pine Grove transformed from a quiet wine country town into the center of a reopened investigation that captured national attention. Sheriff Dominguez established an incident command center at the department, bringing in additional detectives from the county and state levels. The medical examiner worked to analyze Sofia's remains, though the lengthy submersion complicated their efforts to determine exact cause of death. The forensic document team made significant progress with the contents of the metal box. Using specialized equipment, they were able to recover substantial portions of Sofia's research and documentation. What emerged painted a disturbing picture. Sofia had been collecting evidence of illegal toxic waste dumping in tributaries that fed into the regional watershed, potentially endangering both wildlife and human communities downstream. Based on her notes, she identified a pattern of contamination that tracked back to a specific industrial facility, explained the lead forensic analyst to Sheriff Dominguez. She had water samples, photographs, and chemical analysis results that would have been very damaging if made public. The industrial facility in question was Valley Processing, a chemical manufacturing plant located about 20 miles from Pine Grove. In 2007, it had been one of the region's largest employers, with significant influence in local politics and commerce. Valley Processing was supposed to be treating their waste according to EPA regulations, Sheriff Dominguez noted, reviewing the file. But Sofia's evidence suggests they were bypassing treatment protocols and dumping directly into Miners Creek, which feeds into the watershed. The detective assigned from the state level, Andrea Morales, no relation to Sofia, had been reviewing the original 2007 missing person case files. "There's something odd here," she told Sheriff Dominguez. The initial investigation seemed to focus exclusively on the accident theory, despite witness statements that should have raised red flags. She pulled out several pages from the old file. 2 separate witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored pickup following a small blue car on County Road 16 the night Sofia disappeared. Those reports were noted but never followed up on. And there was a security camera at the winery that might have captured vehicles on that road, but the footage was never requested. Sheriff Dominguez frowned. That's a significant oversight. Who was leading the investigation back then? Deputy Chief Robert Garrison, Morales replied. He retired about 5 years after Sofia's disappearance. Moved to Arizona, according to department records. The name triggered a memory for Sheriff Dominguez. Garrison. I think he served on some local committees before my time. Let me check something. She pulled up county records on her computer, scanning through historical documents. Here it is. Robert Garrison served on the Pine Grove Economic Development Committee from 2005 to 2010. And look who else was on that committee: James Harrington, then CEO of Valley Processing. The connection was troubling. The deputy chief who had led the investigation into Sofia's disappearance had direct ties to the company she appeared to be investigating for environmental crimes. Meanwhile, the forensic examination of Sofia's Honda Civic was yielding crucial evidence. The impact marks on the rear bumper were definitively identified as coming from a larger vehicle, consistent with a truck or SUV. Paint transfer analysis revealed dark green paint embedded in the scratches. We're running the paint composition through the database, the forensic technician explained. It's a specific shade of green used primarily on 2006 and 2007 Ford F-250s. Not conclusive on its own, but it narrows down the potential vehicles significantly. With each passing day, the investigation gained momentum. Sheriff Dominguez authorized a search of county vehicle registrations from 2007, looking for dark green Ford F-250s. The results were cross-referenced with individuals connected to Valley Processing. 3 days after Sofia's car was recovered, Detective Morales burst into Sheriff Dominguez's office, excitement evident in her usually composed demeanor. "We've got a match," she announced. A 2007 dark green Ford F-250 registered to Michael Harrington in 2007. Harrington? Sheriff Dominguez repeated. Any relation to James Harrington from Valley Processing? Morales nodded grimly. His son. Michael was 27 in 2007, working as operations manager at his father's company. And here's where it gets interesting: he reported his truck stolen 3 days after Sofia disappeared. The report was taken by Deputy Chief Garrison himself. The truck was supposedly found abandoned and burned in a ravine 50 miles away. Sheriff Dominguez leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. So Michael Harrington had means and potentially motive if Sofia was threatening to expose his family's company. And the deputy chief handling Sofia's case had connections to the Harringtons and conveniently wrote off the truck that might have been used to force her off the road. Exactly, Morales confirmed. And there's more. I pulled Michael Harrington's current information. After his father retired, he took over as CEO of Valley Holdings, the parent company that still owns several manufacturing facilities in Northern California. He's now one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the region. The revelations transformed the investigation into something far larger than anyone had anticipated. What had begun as the resolution of a missing person case was evolving into a potential conspiracy involving corporate environmental crimes, obstruction of justice, and homicide reaching back 17 years. Sheriff Dominguez knew they needed to proceed carefully. We need more before we move on, Harrington. Let's get the forensic analysis of Sofia's documents completed, and I want to interview former employees of Valley Processing from 2007. Someone might have known what Sofia discovered. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Professor Chen contacted Sheriff Dominguez, requesting an urgent meeting. When he arrived at the station, he brought Layla Washington with him, along with an elderly man none of them had met before. This is Dr. Victor Martinez, Chen introduced him. He was a senior environmental scientist at Valley Processing in 2007. After seeing the news about Sofia's car being recovered, he reached out to me through the university. Martinez, now in his 70s, spoke with a quiet intensity. I knew Sofia Mendez. Not personally, but through her research. She contacted me in 2007 after detecting elevated levels of restricted chemicals in water samples from Miners Creek. She suspected they were coming from our facility, and she was right. Sheriff Dominguez leaned forward. Did you provide her with information? Martinez nodded. Anonymously, yes. I confirm that. The company was bypassing waste treatment protocols to save money. The chemicals they were dumping cause long-term ecosystem damage and are linked to increased cancer rates in humans. I gave Sofia internal documents proving what was happening. Why are you coming forward now? Detective Morales asked. Martinez's eyes filled with tears. Because I've carried this guilt for 17 years. I knew something had happened to her. She was supposed to meet me the day after she disappeared, to collect final documentation. When she vanished and her car wasn't found. I suspected the worst. But I was afraid. I had a family, a mortgage. The Harringtons were powerful. Did you have any indication that Michael Harrington knew about Sofia's investigation? Sheriff Dominguez asked. Yes, Martinez replied firmly. 2 days before Sofia disappeared, I overheard Michael in a heated argument with his father. He said, that marine biologist is becoming a problem. She's collecting water samples and asking questions. James told him to handle it, but be smart. I didn't think. I never imagined he would. The testimony was compelling, but they would need more to build a case strong enough to move against someone as powerful as Michael Harrington. Sheriff Dominguez deployed deputies to track down former Valley Processing employees, while Detective Morales focused on the financial records of the company from 2007, looking for evidence of environmental fines they might have faced if Sofia's research had become public. The forensic document team provided another crucial piece of evidence when they recovered a partially preserved photograph from Sofia's waterproof camera found in her trunk. Though damaged, the image clearly showed a truck matching the description of Michael Harrington's F-250 parked near an outflow pipe where waste was being discharged into Miners Creek. The metadata from the camera confirmed the photo was taken the day before Sofia disappeared. 1 week after the recovery of Sofia's car, Sheriff Dominguez felt they had enough to act. With approval from the district attorney, she obtained search warrants for Michael Harrington's home, office, and personal records. The early morning raid was conducted with support from state law enforcement to ensure no evidence could be destroyed. At his sprawling estate in the hills above Pine Grove, Michael Harrington was taken into custody. The successful businessman's face a mask of shocked disbelief as deputies led him to a waiting patrol car. News cameras captured the moment, creating a stark contrast to the images of Sofia's car being pulled from Crescent Lake just days earlier. In the Mendez home, Carmen and Miguel watched the arrest on television, holding hands tightly. After all these years, Carmen whispered, tears streaming down her face. Sofia will have justice. Miguel nodded, his expression solemn but determined. This isn't just for Sofia anymore, Mama. It's for everyone whose water was poisoned, everyone who was lied to. Sofia was trying to protect this community. Now we'll finish what she started. As Michael Harrington was processed at the county jail, the magnitude of what had been uncovered continued to grow. Preliminary searches of his home revealed he had kept items related to Sofia's case, newspaper clippings about her disappearance carefully preserved in a locked drawer, along with what appeared to be fragments of documents similar to those found in Sofia's metal box. Pine Grove residents gathered spontaneously at Crescent Lake that evening, hundreds of candles illuminating the shore near where Sofia's car had finally been discovered. Mayor Walsh addressed the somber crowd. Today marks a turning point for our community, she said, her voice carrying across the still water. For 17 years, we've lived with the mystery of Sofia Mendez's disappearance. Now we face an even more difficult truth, that she may have been silenced for trying to protect us. As we process this painful revelation, let us honor her memory by committing ourselves to the environmental stewardship she championed, and to ensuring that justice, however delayed, is finally served. Professor Chen and his students joined the vigil, standing near the Mendez family. Layla Washington approached Miguel after the ceremony. "I never knew your sister," she said quietly, but finding her felt important, like completing something unfinished. "I'm studying marine biology too, because of people like her who stood up for what was right." Miguel nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. Sofia would have liked that. She always said science was about truth, uncovering it, sharing it, standing by it. Even when it's dangerous. As the candles burned low and the crowd gradually dispersed, Sheriff Dominguez remained at the lake's edge, gazing out at the water now turned golden by the setting sun. The case was far from closed. There would be months of investigation ahead, building the prosecution against Michael Harrington and potentially others involved in the conspiracy. But standing there, where Sofia's car had remained hidden for 17 long years, she felt a profound sense that truth, like the vehicle itself, had finally risen to the surface. The recovery of Sofia Mendez's Honda Civic from the depths of Crescent Lake had begun as the resolution of a long-cold missing person case. It had transformed into something far more significant: the unraveling of a corporate environmental crime, a cover-up reaching into local law enforcement, and a young woman's courage that, even 17 years after her death, would finally bring accountability to those who had silenced her. In Pine Grove, a community built on the beauty of its natural surroundings, Sofia's legacy would not merely be that of a tragedy, but of a reckoning long overdue and a reminder that some truths, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find their way into the light. In the days following the discovery of Sofia's car, the quiet town of Pine Grove was transformed. The sleepy community nestled among Northern California's vineyards became the center of an intensifying investigation that grew more complex with each passing day. Sheriff Alicia Dominguez's office, typically handling routine traffic incidents and occasional property disputes, now bustled with activity as investigators from the county and state level joined forces to unravel what had happened to Sofia Mendez 17 years earlier. Michael Harrington's arrest had sent shockwaves through the community. The Harrington name had long represented prosperity and philanthropy in Pine Grove. Valley Holdings donations had built the town's community center, funded scholarships, and sponsored countless local events. Now, residents struggled to reconcile this benevolent public image with the emerging evidence that the company's success had been built on environmental crimes, and possibly murder. The preliminary hearing was scheduled at the county courthouse, a historic stone building that had stood in downtown Pine Grove since 1910. By dawn on that crisp autumn morning, a line of spectators stretched down the block, all hoping for a seat inside. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical trees among the century-old oaks that surrounded the courthouse square. Carmen and Miguel Mendez arrived early, escorted by Sheriff Dominguez through a side entrance to avoid the press. Carmen wore a simple black dress, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, a small photo of Sofia pinned to her lapel. Miguel walked beside her, protective and solemn in a dark suit. The years of uncertainty had aged them both beyond their years, but today their eyes held something new, a fierce determination that had replaced the hollow grief of not knowing. "Are you ready for this?" Sheriff Dominguez asked gently as they approached the courtroom door. Carmen nodded, clutching her rosary. 17 years I've waited to look in the face of the person who took my daughter. I am more than ready." Inside, the courtroom filled to capacity. On one side sat the Mendez family and their supporters, Sofia's former colleagues from the Marine Research Center, Professor Chen and his students, neighbors who had helped search for Sofia years ago, and many Pine Grove residents who had never met Sofia but felt connected to her story. On the other side sat a small group of Harrington's business associates and legal team, their expensive suits and tense expressions creating a stark contrast. Michael Harrington was led in by deputies, no longer in the tailored business attire that had been his uniform as CEO, but in an orange jumpsuit that seemed to drain the color from his face. At 52, he remained physically fit, his salt and pepper hair precisely cut, his posture military straight even in custody. His eyes darted around the courtroom, briefly meeting Miguel's fierce gaze before quickly looking away. District Attorney Eleanor Palmer rose to present the state's case. A veteran prosecutor with 25 years of experience, she had personally taken on this high-profile case. Her voice rang clear through the packed courtroom as she outlined the charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to obstruct justice, environmental crimes, and corporate fraud. What we will demonstrate through evidence and testimony, Palmer explained to the judge, is that on October 15, 2007, the defendant deliberately forced Sofia Mendez's vehicle off Crescent Lake Bridge, resulting in her death. This was not a random act of violence or a tragic accident. This was a calculated murder committed to silence Ms. Mendez before she could expose illegal toxic waste dumping being conducted by Valley Processing, where the defendant served as operations manager. Palmer methodically presented the physical evidence recovered from Sofia's car: the impact marks on the rear bumper, the green paint transfer matching Harrington's Ford F-250, and most damning of all, the waterproof metal box containing Sofia's documentation of the company's environmental crimes. Dr. Victor Martinez was called to testify, his hands trembling slightly as he took the oath. The elderly scientist described his role at Valley Processing in 2007 and his anonymous collaboration with Sofia after she discovered elevated toxin levels in water samples. "She contacted me after tracing the contamination to our facility," Martinez explained, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. "I confirmed her suspicions and provided internal documents showing the company was bypassing required treatment processes to save money. The chemicals being dumped were known carcinogens with devastating effects on aquatic life and potentially harmful to human health." "And did you share this information with the defendant?" Palmer asked. Martinez shook his head. "No, but he knew someone was investigating. 2 days before Sofia disappeared, I overheard him arguing with his father, James Harrington. Michael said, that marine biologist is becoming a problem. His father told him to handle it, but be smart. I never imagined he would. I've carried this guilt for 17 years. Harrington's defense attorney, Spencer Caldwell, one of the most expensive criminal lawyers in Northern California, objected vigorously, arguing that the overheard conversation was vague and could have referred to legal means of addressing Sofia's investigation. The judge overruled, allowing the testimony to stand. Professor Jackson Chen testified next, explaining how his research team had discovered Sofia's car and the significance of the documents recovered from the metal box. These water sample analyses and chemical profiles definitively linked the contaminants to Valley Processing's specific manufacturing processes, Chen explained, pointing to enlarged images of Sofia's preserved documentation. This evidence would have been sufficient to trigger a major EPA investigation and potentially result in criminal charges, substantial fines, and a shutdown of operations. As the morning progressed, forensic experts detailed their findings from Sofia's recovered Honda Civic. The impact analysis showed her car had been struck from behind at considerable speed, the angle indicating a deliberate ramming rather than an accidental collision. The medical examiner testified that Sofia had likely survived the initial impact but drowned after the car entered the lake, a detail that brought fresh tears to Carmen's eyes and caused Miguel to clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. The most damaging testimony came from a former Valley Processing security guard who had never been interviewed during the original investigation. Timothy Ramirez had been working the night shift on October 15, 2007, and had seen Michael Harrington return to the facility well after midnight, his green F-250 truck showing front-end damage. He seemed agitated, not himself, Ramirez recalled. When I asked if everything was okay, he said he'd hit a deer on County Road 16. But I remember thinking it was strange because there was no blood or fur on the truck, just some blue paint scratches. 3 days later, he reported that same truck stolen. By the time the lunch recess was called, the mood in the courtroom was somber. The evidence painted a disturbing picture of corporate corruption, environmental disregard, and ultimately, murder. Even Harrington's staunchest business allies seemed shaken by the revelations. During the break, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, broadcasting live updates to a national audience now captivated by the case. Environmental activists began to gather, holding signs demanding justice for Sofia and accountability for corporate polluters. The story had transcended a local murder case to become a symbol of corporate environmental crimes and the lengths to which some would go to conceal them. Inside a small conference room, Carmen and Miguel sat with Sheriff Dominguez and District Attorney Palmer, picking at sandwiches no one had the appetite to eat. "You're doing wonderfully," Palmer assured them. "The evidence is strong, and the jury will be seated for the trial proper if the judge binds this over, which I fully expect." Carmen nodded, her eyes distant. "All these years, I imagined so many scenarios. Maybe she'd had an accident. Maybe she'd been carjacked. I never imagined someone would deliberately kill her just to protect their profits. Money and power make people do terrible things," Sheriff Dominguez said quietly. "But they also eventually expose the truth. If Sofia hadn't secured that evidence in a waterproof box, if Professor Chen's team hadn't found her car, if Dr. Martinez hadn't finally come forward, the truth might never have surfaced." Miguel looked up, his expression resolute. "But it did surface. Sofia made sure of that. Even after 17 years, she's still fighting for what's right." When the hearing resumed, the defense began its counterargument. Attorney Caldwell attempted to create reasonable doubt, suggesting that the evidence had been compromised by years underwater, that the witness testimony was unreliable due to the passage of time, and that the overheard conversation between Michael and James Harrington could have been misinterpreted. Caldwell called a paid expert who proposed alternative theories for the damage to Sofia's car, including the possibility that she had lost control in the fog and struck the bridge railing before entering the lake. He suggested that the metal box of evidence could have been planted, though he couldn't explain how or by whom. As Caldwell questioned the integrity of the investigation, subtle changes began to appear in Michael Harrington's demeanor. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident posture gradually crumbling. When Caldwell suggested that Dr. Martinez might have fabricated his testimony out of guilt over his own involvement in the environmental violations, Harrington visibly winced. During the final statements, District Attorney Palmer stood directly before the judge, her voice clear and unwavering. "Your Honor, the evidence before you today demonstrates probable cause to believe that Michael Harrington committed murder to silence Sofia Mendez and protect his family's company from the consequences of their environmental crimes. For 17 years, he has lived in freedom while Sofia Mendez lay at the bottom of Crescent Lake. For 17 years, her family has lived with the agony of not knowing what happened to their daughter and sister. And for 17 years, the toxic chemicals Valley Processing dumped have continued to affect the watershed, potentially harming countless people and wildlife. We ask that you bind this case over for trial on all counts." Caldwell countered with arguments about circumstantial evidence and the challenges of a case so old, but his words seemed to lack conviction, as if even he had been swayed by the weight of evidence against his client. As the proceedings drew to a close, Judge Marjorie Taylor looked directly at Michael Harrington. "Before I rule on whether this case will proceed to trial, I want to hear from the defendant. Mr. Harrington, while you are under no obligation to speak, is there anything you wish to say at this time?" The courtroom fell silent. Harrington conferred briefly with his attorney, who seemed to be advising against speaking. But after a moment, Harrington stood, his shoulders no longer squared with confidence. "Your Honor," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion that surprised everyone present. "For 17 years, I've told myself a story about what happened that night. I told myself it was an accident, that I was protecting my family's legacy, that one life was an acceptable sacrifice for the greater good our company provided to this community." Caldwell moved to stop his client, but Harrington waved him off. "I followed Sofia Mendez that night. I knew she had evidence that would destroy everything my father had built, everything that was meant to be my inheritance. I intended only to confront her, to offer her money, a job, whatever it would take to keep her quiet." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Carmen pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock at this unexpected confession. "But when I saw her on that road, knowing she was heading to meet someone with the evidence, something snapped. I accelerated. I hit her car deliberately. I watched it crash through the bridge railing and into the lake. I didn't stop. I didn't call for help. I drove away and reported my truck stolen days later." Harrington's voice broke as he continued, "I've lived with this every day for 17 years. I've built schools and funded hospitals with blood money, trying to balance the scales. But nothing has eased the weight of what I did." He turned toward the Mendez family, his eyes meeting Carmen's tear-filled gaze. "Mrs. Mendez, Miguel, no apology can ever be sufficient. But I am profoundly sorry for taking Sofia from you, for the years of not knowing, for the pain I caused. I accept whatever punishment the court deems appropriate." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Taylor called for order, her gavel striking sharply. Caldwell appeared stunned by his client's unexpected confession, frantically scribbling notes and whispering urgently to his paralegal. In light of the defendant's admission, Judge Taylor said when order was restored, "This case will proceed to trial. Bail is denied. The defendant is remanded to custody pending trial." As Harrington was led away by deputies, a weight seemed to lift from the courtroom. Carmen wept openly, her tears now carrying a mixture of grief and relief. Miguel sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, his own expression a complex blend of vindication and sorrow. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around District Attorney Palmer, who confirmed that Harrington's confession would significantly impact the case moving forward. "We will be discussing plea options with the defense," she explained, "but we remain committed to ensuring justice for Sofia Mendez and accountability for the environmental crimes that led to her death." Professor Chen found Miguel in the courthouse corridor as the crowd dispersed. "Your sister was remarkably brave," he said quietly. "She stood up against a powerful corporation to protect the environment, knowing the risks. Her work will not be forgotten." Miguel nodded, his eyes red but dry. "Sofia always said that truth was like water, it might be diverted or contained for a while, but it would always find a way to break through eventually." In the following weeks, the case continued to unfold in ways that transformed Pine Grove and reached far beyond its borders. Michael Harrington formally pled guilty to second-degree murder and multiple environmental violations in exchange for his testimony against former Valley Processing executives who had been complicit in both the pollution and the cover-up. The EPA launched a comprehensive investigation of all Valley Holdings facilities, uncovering a pattern of environmental violations spanning decades. Remediation efforts began immediately, with funds from seized Valley assets dedicated to cleaning up the affected watersheds. Former Deputy Chief Robert Garrison was extradited from Arizona to face charges of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. His role in burying Sofia's case and protecting the Harringtons revealed a deeper corruption that had poisoned local law enforcement. 1 month after the preliminary hearing, Sofia Mendez was finally laid to rest in Pine Grove Cemetery. The service drew hundreds from across Northern California and beyond, environmental activists, marine biologists, community members, and families affected by similar corporate pollution cases. Sofia's legacy had grown beyond that of a murder victim to become a symbol of environmental justice and the power of individual courage in the face of corporate greed. Carmen stood at the graveside, surrounded by an honor guard of students from the Marine Research Center where Sofia had worked. "My daughter loved the ocean and all the creatures in it," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "She believed that protecting our waters meant protecting our future. For 17 years, I kept her memory alive by speaking her name every day. Now, I will honor her by continuing her work in whatever way I can." Miguel announced the creation of the Sofia Mendez Environmental Justice Foundation, funded by a portion of the settlement from Valley Holdings. The foundation would provide resources for whistleblowers exposing environmental crimes, support for affected communities, and scholarships for students pursuing careers in environmental science and advocacy. Professor Chen's research team expanded their project to include comprehensive testing of the regional watershed, their work now supported by state funding. Layla Washington took a leading role, her passion for marine biology fueled by Sofia's story. "Finding Sofia's car was just the beginning," she explained during a community meeting. "Now we're carrying forward her mission to protect these waters for generations to come." Sheriff Dominguez implemented reforms within the department, creating new oversight protocols to prevent future corruption and establishing an environmental crimes unit dedicated to investigating corporate pollution. "Sofia Mendez's case taught us that environmental crimes are not victimless," she said during a press conference. "They can lead to profound human tragedy and erode the very foundation of justice in our communities." 6 months after Sofia's car emerged from Crescent Lake, Michael Harrington was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Standing before the court in his orange jumpsuit, he appeared smaller somehow, the weight of his guilt and public disgrace visible in his posture and expression. No sentence can restore what was taken from the Mendez family, Judge Taylor stated during the sentencing. No penalty can adequately address 17 years of cover-up and deception. But today's judgment affirms that no one, regardless of wealth, power, or position, is above accountability for their actions. The sentencing marked a milestone for Pine Grove, but Sofia's story continued to ripple outward. National environmental organizations cited her case when advocating for stronger corporate regulations. Law schools included it in their curriculum as a study in environmental justice and corporate accountability. Marine biology programs established Sofia Mendez Memorial Scholarships for students committed to water quality research. At Crescent Lake, where Sofia's car had remained hidden for so many years, the community established a memorial. A simple stone bench overlooking the water bore a plaque with Sofia's photograph and the words, "For Sofia Mendez, who gave her life protecting these waters." The truth, like the tide, cannot be held back forever. 1 year after the discovery, on a bright spring morning, Carmen Mendez sat on that bench, gazing out at the lake's calm surface. Miguel joined her, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers to place at the memorial. "I was thinking about something Sofia used to say," Carmen said softly as her son sat beside her. "She told me once that in nature, nothing is ever truly lost, it just changes form. Energy becomes matter becomes energy again in an endless cycle." Miguel nodded, taking his mother's weathered hand in his. "She was right. Look at everything that's happened because of her, the changes in environmental policy, the students inspired by her story, the people speaking up about corporate pollution who might have remained silent before." Carmen smiled through her tears. "She's still here, working through all of them. Through us." As they sat together, a group of schoolchildren approached the lake, clipboards in hand. Their teacher explained they were conducting water quality tests as part of a new environmental education program implemented across the county, a program named in Sofia's honor. "Today we're learning how to be watershed guardians," the teacher told her students, her voice carrying across the water. "Each of you has the power to protect our environment, just like Sofia Mendez did. One person can make a difference that lasts for generations." The children spread out along the shore, carefully collecting water samples and recording observations. Their voices, bright with purpose and curiosity, drifted to where Carmen and Miguel sat. "This is her legacy," Miguel said softly. Carmen nodded, watching the children work. "Not just justice or closure, but a new generation who will carry forward what she began." In Pine Grove, California, the story of Sofia Mendez had transformed from a cold case into a catalyst for change. A young woman's courage, though it had cost her life, had ultimately created ripples that would continue long after the headlines faded and the courtroom emptied. What emerged from the depths of Crescent Lake wasn't just a car or evidence of a crime, it was a truth powerful enough to transform a community, expose corruption, and inspire a movement. As sunlight danced across the water where Sofia's car had rested in darkness for 17 years, that truth continued to spread, illuminating dark corners and inspiring those who heard it to stand a little taller, speak a little louder, and protect what mattered with the same unwavering courage that had defined Sofia's final days. The case that had once been filed away and nearly forgotten now served as a powerful reminder that no truth remains buried forever, that justice, however delayed, can still bring healing, and that one person's commitment to doing what is right can echo through generations, creating change that stretches far beyond what they could have imagined. In that way, Sofia Mendez had never truly disappeared at all. 5 years after Michael Harrington's conviction, Pine Grove had transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable on that foggy night when Sofia Mendez disappeared. The town that once relied heavily on Valley Holdings as its economic engine had diversified, reimagining itself as a center for environmental research and sustainable tourism. The old Valley Processing Facility, shuttered after the revelations of toxic dumping, had been converted into the Northern California Center for Environmental Science, drawing researchers from across the country. On a bright September morning, the center buzzed with activity as it prepared for the inaugural Sofia Mendez Memorial Conference. Attendees from government agencies, environmental organizations, academic institutions, and community advocacy groups gathered in the building that once housed the very corporation responsible for Sofia's death. The transformation of the space served as a powerful symbol of how tragedy had been alchemized into positive change. Layla Washington, now Dr. Washington, stood at the podium in the main conference hall, adjusting her notes. In the 5 years since helping discover Sofia's car, she had completed her PhD in marine ecology and now directed the watershed protection program at the center. The audience settled as she began her opening address. 5 years ago, I was a graduate student with a sonar device, participating in what I thought was a routine lake mapping project, she began, her voice steady and confident. That day changed not only my life but the lives of countless others. Today, we gather to honor Sofia Mendez's legacy and to continue the work she began 22 years ago. The conference hall was packed with faces both familiar and new to Pine Grove. Professor Chen sat in the front row, now semi-retired but still actively mentoring the next generation of environmental scientists. Beside him sat Dr. Victor Martinez, the whistleblower who had finally found the courage to come forward. Though advanced in years, his eyes remained sharp and engaged as he listened to Layla speak. The Sofia Mendez Environmental Justice Foundation has now funded over 100 community-based water monitoring programs across 5 states, Layla continued. These citizen scientist initiatives have identified 47 potential sites of illegal dumping, resulting in 18 successful enforcement actions by state and federal agencies. Miguel Mendez watched from the side of the stage, pride evident in his expression. At 45, he had dedicated himself to the foundation bearing his sister's name, traveling the country to speak about corporate accountability and environmental protection. The foundation had become one of the most respected environmental advocacy organizations in the country, its legal defense fund providing crucial support for whistleblowers in affected communities. But perhaps the most significant impact of Sofia's story has been legislative, Layla continued. The Mendez Act, signed into law last year, strengthens protections for environmental whistleblowers and increases penalties for corporate polluters. For the first time, executives can be held personally liable for environmental crimes committed under their leadership. The audience applauded enthusiastically. The Mendez Act represented years of advocacy, testifying before congressional committees, and building bipartisan support. Miguel had been present at the White House signing ceremony, carrying a photograph of Sofia that now had a place in environmental protection history. After Layla's introduction, the day proceeded with presentations on watershed protection, community advocacy strategies, and the latest research on detecting and mitigating industrial pollution. Scientists shared new technologies for water quality monitoring, while legal experts discussed how the Mendez Act was already strengthening enforcement actions against corporate violators. During the lunch break, Miguel found himself surrounded by young environmental science students, eager to share how Sofia's story had inspired their career choices. I was 12 when they found your sister's car, a young woman told him, her expression earnest. It was the first time I understood that environmental protection wasn't just about saving animals or pretty places, it was about human lives and justice. That's why I'm studying environmental law now. Miguel nodded, still moved even after hearing countless similar stories. Sofia would have been amazed to see all of you. She never thought of herself as doing anything extraordinary, just what was necessary and right. Across the room, Carmen Mendez sat with a small group of mothers from communities affected by industrial pollution. At 78, her hair was now completely white, but she remained a powerful presence, her quiet dignity and unwavering determination inspiring others who were fighting their own battles for environmental justice. After we lost Sofia, I thought my life was over, she told a woman from a small town in Oregon where a paper mill had contaminated the groundwater. But I discovered that grief can be transformed into purpose. You are not just fighting for clean water, you are fighting for your children's future. Never let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter. The afternoon session featured a panel discussion on the intersection of environmental justice and corporate accountability. Miguel joined legal experts and advocates on stage, speaking candidly about the challenges of taking on powerful interests. The corporations responsible for environmental crimes rely on people feeling powerless, he explained. They count on the complexity of the science, the intimidation of legal proceedings, and the isolation of affected communities. But Sofia showed us that one person with truth on their side can ultimately bring down even the most powerful opponent. A young journalist raised her hand during the Q&A. The Harrington case revealed corruption within local law enforcement that helped cover up both the pollution and your sister's murder. Has enough changed in how we oversee these power structures? Miguel considered the question thoughtfully. The reforms Sheriff Dominguez implemented in Pine Grove have become a model for other communities. The Independent Environmental Crimes Unit she established, with its separate chain of command and specialized training, addresses the vulnerability we saw when economic influence corrupted the investigation process. He paused before continuing, but we must remain vigilant. Power and money will always seek paths of least resistance. Transparency and community oversight are not one-time achievements, they require constant attention and renewal. As the formal conference proceedings concluded for the day, attendees gathered for a sunset ceremony at Crescent Lake. The memorial bench where Carmen often sat had been joined by a simple boardwalk extending over the water, allowing visitors to stand above the spot where Sofia's car had rested for 17 years. Carmen walked slowly to the end of the boardwalk, supported by Miguel. In her hands, she carried a small wreath of native wildflowers. The gathered crowd fell silent as she spoke, her voice soft but clear. 22 years ago, I lost my daughter to corporate greed and callous disregard for human life. For 17 of those years, I lived with the agony of not knowing what happened to her. But Sofia never truly disappeared. Her spirit, her determination, her love for this earth and its waters remained alive. She gently placed the wreath on the water, watching as it floated above the spot where Sofia had remained hidden for so long. Look around you, she continued, gesturing to the gathered crowd. Scientists working to protect our waters. Lawyers fighting for justice. Young people choosing careers in environmental protection. Communities standing up to polluters. This is Sofia's true legacy, not just the case that bears her name, but the movement she inspired. As the wreath drifted on the gentle current, a flock of white egrets rose from the shoreline, their wings catching the golden light of the setting sun. The crowd watched in silent appreciation of the moment's poignant beauty. Among those present was Sheriff Alicia Dominguez, now in her second elected term after being appointed to complete her predecessor's tenure. The Sofia Mendez case had defined her career and shaped her approach to law enforcement. Under her leadership, the Pine Grove Sheriff's Department had become a model for environmental crimes enforcement, regularly consulting with other agencies nationwide. The hardest part of this case wasn't solving it once we had Sofia's car, she confided to a colleague as they walked back from the lakeside ceremony. It was confronting the fact that the truth had been deliberately buried by people in positions of trust. That realization changed how I view the responsibility of wearing this badge. Back at the conference center, a reception allowed attendees to network and share stories in a more informal setting. Large photographs of Sofia lined the walls, not just the formal portraits from news coverage, but personal photos shared by the Mendez family. Sofia laughing with colleagues, Sofia collecting water samples, Sofia embracing her mother at her graduation. These images transformed her from a symbol back into a human being, passionate, dedicated, and full of promise cut tragically short. Professor Chen found himself speaking with a group of his former students, including Layla. When we started that lake mapping project, we had no idea we were about to change history, he reflected. It reminds me how science serves truth in unexpected ways. We were studying drought impacts on lake levels, but what we uncovered was a truth about human corruption and courage. Layla nodded. I often think about how close we came to missing that discovery. If we'd mapped just 100 yards in another direction first, if we'd used different sonar settings, if we'd dismissed that anomalous reading, Sofia might still be waiting at the bottom of that lake. But you didn't miss it, Miguel said, joining their conversation. You followed the evidence, just as Sofia would have done. That's the essence of both good science and good justice, following where truth leads, regardless of how uncomfortable or inconvenient that truth might be. As evening deepened, the reception gradually wound down. Attendees departed with renewed commitment to their environmental work, many exchanging contact information and making plans for future collaboration. The Sofia Mendez case had created a network of connections between people who might otherwise never have found common cause. Carmen, tired but fulfilled, prepared to leave with Miguel. As they walked toward the exit, a young man approached them hesitantly. "Mrs. Mendez? Mr. Mendez? I'm not sure if you remember me. I'm Ryan Harrington." The name hung in the air between them. Ryan, Michael Harrington's son, had been just 17 when his father was arrested. Now in his mid-20s, he bore a resemblance to Michael that was impossible to miss. Carmen studied him for a moment before speaking. "Of course I remember you, Ryan." The young man shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to tell you. I've been working with the watershed restoration project in the Eastern County, using my environmental engineering degree to help undo some of the damage my family's company caused." "I know," Carmen said gently. "Miguel told me." Ryan looked surprised. "You knew? And you're okay with me being here?" Miguel stepped forward. Ryan approached the foundation last year, wanting to contribute but unsure if his presence would be welcome. "We decided that healing comes in many forms, and redemption should be available to those who truly seek it." Carmen reached out and took Ryan's hand in her weathered one. "What your father did cannot be undone. But you are not responsible for his crimes. You are responsible only for your own choices, and you have chosen to be part of the healing rather than continuing the harm." Sofia would approve of that. Tears welled in Ryan's eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you can know." As they parted ways, Miguel reflected on how Sofia's legacy had touched lives in ways no one could have predicted, creating unlikely alliances, inspiring unexpected vocations, and even offering paths to redemption for those connected to the original crime. Later that night, Miguel drove Carmen home to the small house she still maintained, though she now split her time between Pine Grove and Miguel's home in Sacramento, where his wife Maria and their children provided the warmth of family she cherished. "It was a good day," Carmen said as they traveled the familiar road. Sofia would have been proud. Miguel nodded, glancing briefly at his mother's profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. "Sometimes I wonder what she would think of all this, her name on legislation, a foundation, conferences." Carmen smiled softly. "She would be embarrassed by the attention. But she would love seeing the work being done. That was always what mattered to her, the work itself, not the recognition." As they passed over Crescent Lake Bridge, newly rebuilt and widened since Sofia's time, Miguel slowed slightly. Both he and Carmen always did this, an unconscious tribute to the spot where Sofia's journey had ended and, in a way, another journey had begun. The next morning, the conference continued with workshops focused on practical applications of environmental protection strategies. Community advocates shared successful campaigns against polluters, scientists demonstrated new water testing technologies, and legal experts outlined strategies for using the Mendez Act to hold corporations accountable. During a break, Miguel found himself speaking with a reporter from a national environmental publication. "After 5 years, what do you see as the most significant change resulting from your sister's case?" the reporter asked. Miguel considered the question carefully. "Beyond the specific legal and policy changes, I think the most profound shift has been in how people perceive environmental crimes." Sofia's story helped people understand that when corporations pollute our water, air, and soil, it's not just an abstract violation of regulations, it's a crime with real victims and real consequences. He gestured toward the conference room where dozens of conversations continued among participants. "Look at the diversity of people here: scientists, lawyers, community members, students, government officials." Before Sofia's case, these groups often worked in isolation from each other. Now they recognize that protecting our environment requires all of these perspectives working in concert. The reporter nodded. "And on a personal level? How has this journey changed you?" "For 17 years, I was defined by the search for my sister," Miguel replied thoughtfully. "Then, for a time, I was defined by the fight for justice after we found her. Now, I find myself defined by what we're building together, this movement that honors her legacy by protecting what she valued most. He paused, looking out the window toward Crescent Lake, visible in the distance. Sofia taught me that there's a difference between being caught in the past and being informed by it. This work isn't just about remembering what happened to her, it's about creating the future she envisioned. The conference concluded that afternoon with an announcement from the Sofia Mendez Environmental Justice Foundation. Miguel took the stage to unveil their newest initiative, a nationwide network of community-based environmental monitoring stations that would allow real-time tracking of water quality in vulnerable watersheds. Today, we're launching what Sofia began 22 years ago with her simple water testing kit and determination to protect this community, Miguel announced. The Clear Waters Network will place advanced monitoring technology in the hands of communities across the country, connected through a shared database that can identify pollution patterns and provide early warning of contamination events. He clicked to a map showing the planned monitoring stations spreading across watersheds in all 50 states. When Sofia found evidence of contamination, she worked alone, vulnerable to those who wanted to silence her. With this network, no environmental defender will ever be isolated again. The data will be public, transparent, and impossible to hide or bury. The audience rose in a standing ovation, the enthusiasm palpable as Miguel outlined how communities could apply to join the network. Funding was already secured for the first 100 monitoring stations, with a 5-year plan to expand to over 1,000 locations nationwide. As the conference concluded and attendees began departing, many stopped to thank the Mendez family. Scientists who had developed new testing methods inspired by Sofia's work. Law students who had chosen environmental law because of her case. Community advocates who had successfully fought polluters using strategies developed from the Mendez case precedents. Carmen embraced many of them, her strength and grace touching everyone she met. Though the weight of Sofia's loss would never fully leave her, she had found purpose in nurturing this community that had grown from her daughter's legacy. That evening, as the sun set once more over Pine Grove, Miguel walked alone to Crescent Lake. The conference crowds had dispersed, leaving the memorial peaceful and quiet. He sat on the bench bearing Sofia's name, gazing out over the water that had held his sister for so long. "We did it, Sofia," he said softly to the gentle waves. "Everything you started is growing beyond what either of us could have imagined." A light breeze rippled across the lake's surface, catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Miguel smiled, feeling a sense of peace that had been elusive for so many years. The story that had begun with tragedy had transformed into something powerful and enduring, not just a solved case or achieved justice, but a movement that would continue to grow and evolve long after those who remembered Sofia were gone. As darkness fell over Crescent Lake, the stars began to appear, reflecting on the water's surface. Miguel remained a while longer, contemplating how a single act of courage, his sister's determination to expose the truth regardless of the consequences, continued to create ripples of change that spread ever outward. Sofia Mendez had disappeared on a foggy October night 22 years earlier. But what emerged from the depths of Crescent Lake was more than just evidence of a crime, it was a legacy of truth, courage, and environmental justice that would endure for generations to come. In that way, Sofia had accomplished exactly what she had set out to do on that final night, to protect the waters and communities she loved, not just for the present, but for all who would come after. Her life had been cut short, but her impact continued to grow, a testament to the enduring power of one person's commitment to doing what is right, no matter the cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.